So let me get this straight. We're playing as some students trapped in a school, people are dying, the word despair is used, and the game looks like this, with a mascot that looks like that. Wait, there are even warning announcements? Yeah, okay, we're not beating the Danganronpa allegations with this one. Okay, let's actually get real for a second though. This isn't Danganronpa 4 or 5 or, I don't know, 9. This is the 100th line, Lost Defense Academy, the newest game from Kodaka, the creator of Danganronpa and Raincoat, in collaboration with Uchikoshi, the creator of Zero Escape and I the Somnium Files. I am very sorry for butchering those names. I will do it again. And this game is very much its own brand new thing. It's not just a book this time, as it contains strategy combat gameplay, kinda like Fire Emblem. We're also not part of a killing or escape game, instead we're working together to defend this school. But while it is quite different, it's hard not to compare it to their previous works, as is evident by the many references and the way that it kind of just subverts all of your expectations, which is genuinely incredible. Especially for me, when making this video, it allows me to put Danganronpa in the title again, because we all know that otherwise you wouldn't have clicked on this video. But this game was always pretty high on my radar because of the people working on it. They have a very distinct style and it really shows in all of their work. If you like one of their games, you'll probably like their other stuff too. And on top of that, they also keep calling it their magnum opus. But despite all of this, I still had my doubts. Danganronpa or Zero Escape does have some gameplay, but a fully fledged combat system is something else entirely. Pair that with the fact that this game is also being developed on a pretty limited budget from their newly created independent studio, and I was just hoping that they would be able to live up to these expectations. But then on the 11th of February, they announced that the 100th line would be getting a demo. There's no better way to sell a game than to let the people play it after all. So I played through it, and as always, I have some thoughts. And if you like content like this, be sure to leave a like and check out my channel, by the way. If you're interested in the 100th line, I probably have some other content that you will enjoy, and it really helps me out, so win-win situation, I guess. But let's get started by talking about the combat system, because as I said, this was the only part that I really had my doubts about, until now at least, because the demo was a lot of fun. The game gives you a lot to play around with, and it feels really smooth to control. You start off with 4 units, and they give you a pretty good base to work with. For those who don't know, this game is turn-based and works on a grid system. You, the enemy, and all of your attacks will be based on this grid. For example, one of your units attacks in a straight line of 4 squares ahead of him. Another unit will attack the squares around him, and most enemies also take up 1 square, while some stronger ones might take up 4 squares, making them easier to hit, but then they also cover more ground to attack you with. But unlike traditional turn-based combat, your actions aren't just decided by whose turn it is. Like, usually when it's the enemy's turn, every enemy makes a move, then it's your turn and all of your allies make a move, and so on. But here, you're bound by your action points, or AP. Every action takes up 1 AP, and you can decide what to use these on. Do you want to move each unit once, or is it more beneficial to use 2 AP on 1 unit, allowing them to take multiple actions? They can only move around the field once per turn though, as they get fatigued after moving, but they can still attack multiple times. The choice is yours, and defeating certain enemies can also give you bonus AP, so you can keep your turn going for longer by prioritizing them. Each character also feels really unique thanks to their skill set, and they're not really limited to a class either. You have characters with smaller movement ranges but larger attack ranges, while others use a vehicle so they can cover a lot more ground. You also have some characters that can choose between attacking multiple squares at once for smaller damage, or they can focus their attack on 1 square to deal more damage. And since these battles also have a pretty large amount of enemies, it also encourages you to try different things and to keep your units on the move. The final mechanic that was available in the demo was the voltage bar at the top of the screen, and out of all of the battle mechanics, this was easily my favorite one, as it allows for a lot of different strategies. During the fight, by taking or dealing damage, this bar will go up, and whenever it's full, you can use a special attack. Once again, each unit has a unique special attack with different attributes, but on top of that, a full bar can also allow for the use of boost actions. These can either give you a straight up damage buff, or they can get rid of the active character's fatigue, so they can reposition before attacking again. These voltage actions animations also don't take up AP, by the way, so you can keep your turn going even if it was supposed to end already, creating a chance for you to take down an enemy that will give you bonus AP, once again extending your turn. All of these things already made the combat system a lot more fun than I had expected. It's really fun to try and get the most out of your AP, and it's satisfying to keep your turn going for as long as possible. There is a lot to play around with here, and it's also a nice bonus that the game looks really stylish and flashy while doing so, with the different cut-in artworks and unique battle animations. But there was one more gameplay mechanic which elevated all of this even more, namely the way that character deaths during combat are implemented. I don't really want to go into the detail on the narrative reasoning behind this yet, as I want to keep the story and gameplay sections of this video separated for ease of spoiler-freeness, but if a character dies during combat, this isn't a permadeath, and death is also a lot more than just -1 active unit. If a character is close to dying, they unlock their Last Resort, which is basically another special attack. It doesn't use AP, it has a unique damage area, and it does a lot of damage. But in return, the character that used it will die. So whenever a character reaches low HP, you can decide on either healing them, or you can make them deal massive damage one more time before going out. Oh yeah, and whenever a character dies, it also adds 100% to your voltage bar. So if the situation is starting to look dire, a well-timed sacrifice could change the entire battle in your favor, which is risky but extremely satisfying if it works out. And on top of all of this, there are also some smaller mechanics. You have some status ailments, for example, like bleed or poison, that both you and the enemy can apply. You can get rid of these by having a character taking a defensive stand, in which they then take less damage. They also recover a bit of HP, and it cures any ailment. Every character also has passive skills, like a defense buff for every square that they moved, or an attack buff for every enemy that they killed in this turn. And then there's also something really small that I really appreciate, namely the fact that the damage numbers actually matter and feel palpable. A lot of games nowadays just throw massive numbers in your face. Congratulations, your level 1 normal attack just did 3265 damage, which feels really meaningless. While here you're doing smaller amounts of damage, like literally 1 or 3 damage, which makes everything a lot clearer, and I also feel like this will make progression more satisfying. It's probably gonna feel really good when you deal 2 or even 3-digit damage for the first time, assuming that the game will scale that way at least. If it sounds like I'm praising this game a lot, that's honestly just because it deserves it. I only played 5 hours of it so far, but I had more fun with it than I ever expected, and I cannot wait to play more. But that also doesn't mean that I don't have any negatives to say about the gameplay. Of course, take this with a grain of salt, as this could change in the full release as we get to progress further, but I really hope that we get more level variety. In the narrative, we are tasked with defending this academy for 100 days, so all the battles take place in front of the school. For the first few days this is fine as you're getting used to the gameplay, but I can see this getting stale pretty fast if we don't get a different map. Think about Fire Emblem, for example, where you have some gimmick levels, or where the strategy is often created by the positioning of your units as you're starting to deal with narrow passageways or environmental effects, where in this game, so far at least, it's always just been an open field. Now, to be fair, the game did already establish a way for them to possibly expand on this, as you go on expeditions outside of the school, and there was this one story battle that took place there, but while it was a nice change of scenery, it was still an open field with no real structural differences outside of a different objective. So I hope that this changes as we venture out further, or maybe they have some other methods of keeping the battles interesting. We only got to control 5 characters in the demo after all, and we know that there are many more. So yeah, if they can keep it fun, then that's awesome, but this could become a downside of the game down the line. But now that I mentioned the exploration outside of the school, this was probably the game's mechanic that I enjoyed the least so far, as it just felt kind of awkward. The exploration basically works like a board game, where you can move a certain amount of spaces and every space has an event taking place on it. The amount of spaces that you can move is randomized, as the game will hand you 2 cards, each with a different number on it. Choose a number and that's how far your character will move in a given direction. If you land on an event space, the game will give you a prompt and some options to choose between. Choose the correct option and you will get some items which can be used to upgrade your characters back at the base. Choose the wrong one, however, and you take some damage. The thing is that there just doesn't really seem to be a way of knowing what the right option is. Take this situation for example. You find the crumbling building, but you can also see some useful crafting materials inside. Do you want to search this collapsing building, or do you want to stay safe at a distance? I picked stay safe, but nope, the building was apparently already crumbling and rubble rained down on my characters, causing one of my characters to take 5 damage. I have no idea what the right option here would have been. Would searching the building have resulted in even more damage, or would we have made it out safe with the items somehow? There's no real way of knowing, so this entire thing just felt like random BS happening while you hope for the best. I really hope that either this mechanic is just a small part of the game, or realistically, I hope that they add some more to this. Add some level of skill rather than just luck, or make a way for our characters to prepare for an expedition so the negative effects have less of an effect, or so we have a higher chance of success. Just spitballing right now. But I do like the fact that we can explore outside of the school, don't get me wrong. It adds to that change of scenery and it also brings some unique scenarios. The game makes you do an investigation, it's really interesting from a world building perspective, and I can see some cool story stuff happening here in the outside world. It's just that I'm not a fan of this random board game where you just have to get lucky. But next I do want to talk about the story, and what you will notice immediately is that this game is very much what you would expect from a team-up between Kodaka and Uchikoshi, while also being the complete opposite. The game takes place in this school, the so-called Last Defense Academy, and our characters were brought here to defend this school for 100 days. We don't know why they were chosen, we don't know where the school is or why it's specifically 100 days, and we also don't know what will happen afterwards. We know that this weird Sirei guy brought us here, but who knows why we need to protect the school, or who even knows who he's working for. We're basically fighting a war here and we don't even know our enemy. We don't know anything, we're just told that this is our duty and failure means the death of our loved ones. Over the course of this demo, the game throws a lot of questions at you. Believe it or not, but I didn't even name all of them. And within this demo, there are already a lot of twists that ask even more questions. This is of course something that we're used to from these creators. Unraveling these mysteries is this game's selling point. But outside of just this setup, the game also features many other elements that we've kind of come to expect. On the Kodaka, Danganronpa and Raincoat side, we have extremely over-the-top characters, both in design and in personality. Some of them are kinda questionable, others will make you pretty annoyed whenever they open their mouths, but some of them are also strangely likable. You can already see some friendships being formed over the course of this demo, and while it remains to be seen how these bonds will evolve, I'm really excited to get to know these characters, to be honest. I'm just thinking about V3, where I absolutely fell in love with the friendship that our main trio had. But among all of these crazy personalities is of course our main character, who is a bit more down to earth compared to the rest. He's really just the average guy character, and while I have yet to play his newest work with AI the Somnium Files, this is where I did start to notice the Uchikoshi Zero Escape influences, as the game has given us quite a few quiet moments already with just our protagonist, where the writing gets very introspective. Of course, we are trapped in a single location, which is very Zero Escape, but beyond that you can also see that the situation is really affecting our main character, with him starting to question his sense of self. But in the game structure, Uchikoshi's influence can also be seen in something larger, because just like in his previous works, the 100 line will have many branching points and many different endings. Outside of that though, maybe it's because we're still in early game, or because I didn't play the Somnium Files, or because it's been a while since I played Zero Escape, but his influence is definitely a lot more subtle compared to Kodaka's. I mean, there's literally a character here that can only be described as the ultimate Danganronpa fan, as all they do is talk about how they would love for this to be a killing game while constantly making references to that franchise. But despite all of these on-the-nose references, the game actually uses these comparisons and expectations in a pretty smart way, as it will try to subvert them at every turn, in both smaller and bigger ways. Yes, the characters are trapped inside of a school, but we're not trying to kill each other. Instead, the mascot Sirei is actively pushing us to become allies to fight a common enemy, and unlike any of their previous works, we also don't get the entire cast revealed at once. So far, we're in the school with 9 other students, but thanks to the trailers we know that at some point we will end up with the classic 16. And just like in all of their other games, within the first hour or so we get greeted by a brutal character death. But nothing is as it seems, because when the students die on school ground, they will be revived, thanks to one of the academy's functions. And while there is a wacky key mascot, after the first few days he strangely disappears and we don't know when or if they'll even be back. There's no real way of knowing what direction this plot is gonna go, and the fact that it keeps subverting every trope that we know, no matter how small, really hooked me. I want to explore this school, I want to interact with everything and talk to all of the characters, because I just really want to know what exactly is going on here, especially when these characters have more to them as it seems. Initially, all of them were surprised with the situation, but later it actually turns out that one of our characters has experience with fighting this enemy. And also outside of the characters, this game just throws a lot at you from the very beginning, because as soon as you press new game, you are greeted with a 15-minute fully animated and voiced cutscene, which doesn't tell you anything in the way of exposition, but it shows us so much of this world. Our characters live in the division of Tokyo, and while the main character is talking about how boring and mundane his life is, we can see that the entire city is placed underneath a ceiling. The day and night cycle is decided by massive spotlights, kinda like Midgar in Final Fantasy VII. There is a morning announcement to wake people up, and they say that it is yet another peaceful day. But a few minutes later, a siren goes off, telling people to enter the nearby shelters. Our main character isn't really fazed by this and just moves to the nearest one. This is just a normal thing here, as if it happens every day, until an announcement rings to tell them that it's safe to leave again. Then we run into a dog who guides us to an abandoned school building, where the dog turns into the mascot, who gives us this knife to stab ourselves. First we ignore him, but then we get attacked by Funko Pops. The ghost shows up again, we use the knife to protect our friend as we stab ourselves, and we get an extremely bloody magical girl transformation into a school uniform, which gives us fighting abilities. So yeah, add all of this to the list of questions that I told you about before. This game is absolutely insane, and I am so here for it. Because while it is insane, it's also strangely coherent, and you can already see what themes this game will be exploring, as it's pretty obvious that this game is all about war. Our characters are not only used to hearing sirens and hiding in bomb shelters, but they're also literally forced to fight this enemy without knowing anything about them, just being told that it's for the protection of their nation. At some point we do get some hints to the identity of our enemy on the battlefield, but they speak in a strange language and we do not understand them. The enemy looks like he's trying to surrender, but one of our characters isn't really a fan of mercy and decides to go in for the execution. The execution being another subversion, by the way. We're all used to the Danganronpa executions, but here we are the ones doing the killing, and it's also done from the POV of the victim. A lot of games make killing a normal thing, but this moment really put that in a different perspective. You get bonus points for it, yes, but it is so messed up at the same time. And we can also see that our characters are really starting to get affected mentally by this entire situation. As our main character is having trouble sleeping, he's starting to doubt himself, and he's starting to think, like, is any of this even real?
Like, is any of this for real? Or not?
He was complaining about his mundane life earlier, but now he just wants to get back to that and to see his friends and family again. But at the same time, we also get these honestly beautiful moments where our characters get to see the sky for the first time. They've lived their entire lives underneath that domed ceiling, while now at this school, they can look out towards the clouds and the stars, causing them to doubt everything that they knew before this. The game also follows this daily structure, by the way, kinda like Persona, I guess. Some days are pretty short and are simply used to level your social stats and to hang out with the characters, but other days are more narrative heavy. But unlike Persona, it is a bit less structured. A day does have 2 time slots for activities, but it's not simply prepare and do hangouts for a certain amount of days, and at the end of that period there is a story moment. The game has been sprinkling narrative all throughout. Even on days where nothing really happens, at night we get greeted by a flashback of our main character, so we can get to know him better, and so we can discover firsthand who he's fighting for and why. Because while we do get to see his best friend in that opening cutscene, their relationship was kind of just really generic and I honestly didn't care too much, but these flashbacks have already made me appreciate her a lot more, while also setting up some future plot points. This is already a lot, and remember, this is only the beginning of the game. The demo went up to day 7 out of 100, and I purposefully avoided some plot points that only come up in the the later days. Because if you watched up to this point in the video and you haven't played the demo yet, I implore you to check it out if any of this sounds even remotely interesting to you. Again, the demo still has some stuff that I didn't talk about, and even outside of that, there are a lot of other things being set up for the later game. More characters have been teased, both in the game itself and in the trailers. We only spent 7 days with our cast so far, and many of them are definitely still hiding some secrets. A lot of areas in the school are still locked, and the rooms that we do have access to leave us with a lot of questions. Like, how does the reviving even work? Is this really just a game mechanic? Knowing these writers, I doubt it, and when investigating the revival chamber, it does ask some interesting questions. Then there's also the matter of the language of our enemies, because while a lot of them look like Funko Pops, there is this one guy that showed up and he actually spoke. It's a language that we don't know, but it's also a language that's used inside of the main menu, which I found really interesting. The game already has me theorizing about many things, and that's just the in-game information. Over on social media, Kodaka has been posting a lot about this game, answering some fan questions about, for example, the multiple endings, which will apparently be pretty easy to keep track of. He also teased that there are still a lot more combat mechanics that we don't know about, and then there's also this one screenshot where it looks like you're convincing one of your allies to join you in battle. Because while the game starts with 9 students, not all of them want to fight, only 4 of them do, and while one of them does get convinced thanks to some story events, it looks like we will have to convince some of the other ones ourselves, which will be a nice shake-up to the daily life gameplay, because the small daily activities did leave me wanting a bit more, to be honest. You level up your social stats by hanging out with characters, each character leveling a specific stat, but these hangouts are kind of just nothing, as they just exist out of a handful of dialogue lines at most. And as a final point, I'm also pleasantly surprised with how polished this game is, by the way. I mentioned this in the beginning of the video, but they didn't have the biggest budget here, and this is also their first self-published title from their newest studio. But despite all of this, quite a bit of the game is voiced. There have been many cutscenes that honestly looks great, and the game in general is just really smooth to play and nice to look at. Also, performance-wise, I didn't run into any frame drops or any issues in general. The game is already really polished and we're still 2 months away from release, so that's a really good sign. Right now, at the time of recording this, the demo is only available on Steam though, with a Switch demo being announced but not yet released. And I really hope that Switch players will have a similar experience, but considering that they're taking a bit longer for the Switch release, I feel like they're just taking that time to polish the game. But I think that kind of does it for my thoughts on the 100th line. This game pleasantly surprised me, and I am extremely excited for the full release. I have my criticisms of the exploration and the social stat hangouts, but those things could still be fleshed out later in the game, and if not, I feel like they're pretty minor criticisms compared to the positives. I do really hope that this game can pull it off though. They are setting up a lot of things, and the fact that there are also this many endings has me a tiny bit worried. I just hope that they can take all of these elements and tell a cohesive story. Naturally, with this many endings, not every single plot point will be addressed in every single ending. There will probably be some joke endings and bad endings, but I really hope that when I reach the so-called true ending, that this game will have provided me with a satisfying conclusion that answered all of these questions in a cohesive way. Yeah, part of me is a bit scared, but another part of me does trust in the vision. And if anyone can tell a narrative this insane while still tying everything together into a poignant and cohesive conclusion, it'll probably be them. And of course, knowing them, while the game is already pretty crazy now, I'm sure that there will be many more twists leading us to an even crazier ending. And you know what, at this point I am just down for the ride. But let me know what you all think of this game. Did you play the demo? Are you waiting for the Switch demo? Or are you just waiting for the full release? Or are you maybe not sold yet? Let's talk about it in the comments down below, and if you are down there, why not leave a like or check out my channel? It only takes a second and it really helps me out. I genuinely appreciate all of the support. But I'm gonna end the video here. Thank you so much for watching, I really hope you enjoyed, and hopefully I'll see you all again soon.